The sky above Vulyrie Prime had not been blue for 3 days. Smoke and ash filled the air, blocking out the twin suns that once warmed this peaceful world. In the streets of the capital city, buildings that had stood for 1,000 years now lay in ruins. The beautiful towers of glass and silver were broken. The gardens where children once played were burning. Elder Counselor Rathani stood in an underground shelter beneath what remained of the government building. Around her, thousands of her people huddled together in fear. The Vulyrie were a gentle species. They had soft gray skin and large dark eyes that could see beauty in everything. For centuries, they had been scholars and traders. They had never built warships. They had never trained soldiers. They had believed that kindness and knowledge would protect them from the darkness of the galaxy. They had been wrong. The Corax Dominion had come without warning. Their fleet of warships had appeared in orbit 3 days ago, and within hours, the bombing had begun. The Corax were hunters. They were conquerors. They took what they wanted from weaker species, and the Vulyrie had nothing to stop them. Rathani looked at the communication screen in front of her. For 3 days, she had sent distress signals to every species she knew. She had begged the Galactic Assembly for help. She had contacted 40 different civilizations, pleading for someone to save her people. No one had answered. The Assembly had sent a formal message explaining that intervention would cause political problems with the Corax Dominion. Other species had simply ignored her calls. Some had responded with sympathy, but offered no help. The galaxy, it seemed, was willing to watch the Vulyrie die. A young aide approached Rathani with tears in her eyes. Elder Counselor, the Corax have activated a suppression field around the planet. Our evacuation ships cannot leave the atmosphere. We are trapped. Rathani closed her eyes. This was the end then. The Corax would bombard them until nothing remained, or they would land troops and take the survivors as slaves. Either way, her civilization was finished. She turned to the communication console one final time. If no help was coming, she would at least leave a record. She would tell the galaxy what happened here, so that future generations might remember the Vulyrie. "This is Elder Counselor Rathani of Vulyrie Prime," she said, her voice steady despite the pain in her heart. "To whoever receives this message, know that we called for help and none came. We do not blame you. We understand that the galaxy is a dangerous place, and that survival often requires looking away from the suffering of others. We thank you for the good years we shared with the galactic community. We forgive those who could not come. Remember us kindly." She ended the transmission and sat down heavily. Above her, through the ceiling of rock and metal, she could hear the distant thunder of Corax weapons striking her world. Far across the galaxy, in a region of space that most species considered empty and unimportant, a human warship moved through the darkness between stars. The USS Resolute was not a large vessel. It was a destroyer built for patrol missions and border security. Its hull was scarred from years of service, and its systems were older than most of its crew. But the ship was still dangerous, still capable, still crewed by men and women who had sworn to protect others. Captain Daniel Morris sat in his command chair, reviewing reports from his department heads. The Resolute was 3 weeks into a routine patrol, far from Earth and far from any human colony. It was boring work, but necessary. Someone had to watch the empty spaces. "Captain," said Ensign Tyler Grant from the communications station. The young officer's voice was uncertain. "I'm picking up something strange. A distress signal, very faint. It's not in any human language." Morris turned to look at Grant. The ensign was barely 22 years old, fresh from the academy. This was his first deep space assignment. "Can you translate it?" "The computer is working on it now, sir." Grant listened to his headset, his face growing pale. "Sir, it's from a species called the Vulyrie. They're under attack. Their homeworld is being destroyed. Lieutenant Commander Maria Santos looked up from her tactical station. She was a veteran officer with sharp eyes and a mind built for combat. The Vulyrie? I've heard of them. Peaceful traders. No military to speak of. Who's attacking them? Morris asked. Grant swallowed hard. The Corax Dominion, sir. A heavy silence fell over the bridge. Every officer knew that name. The Corax were predators who had destroyed dozens of weaker species. They were brutal, efficient, and they commanded one of the largest fleets in the region. Chief Engineer Kevin Park spoke from his station near the back of the bridge. Captain, the Vulyrie system is 4 days away at maximum speed. But sir, we're one ship. The Corax typically deploy fleet groups of 30 vessels or more. I'm aware of the math, Chief, Morris said quietly. Santos pulled up a star chart on her screen. Sir, we have no treaty with the Vulyrie. We've never even made formal contact with them. Technically, this isn't our fight. Morris stood and walked to the main view screen. The stars stretched out before him, cold and indifferent. Somewhere out there, a civilization was dying. Somewhere out there, people were calling for help and hearing only silence. He thought about what it meant to be human. He thought about the history of his species, the long struggle from darkness into light. Humans had known suffering. They had known war and cruelty and abandonment. And through all of it, they had learned one simple truth. No one should have to face the darkness alone. Ensign Grant, Morris said, send a response to the Vulyrie. Tell them that help is coming. Grant's eyes went wide. Sir? Lieutenant Wong, set a course for the Vulyrie system. Maximum speed. Morris turned to face his crew. I know what we're sailing into. I know the odds. But I did not join this service to ignore people who are suffering. If the rest of the galaxy wants to look away, that's their choice. But the Resolute does not abandon anyone. Santos nodded slowly, a grim smile crossing her face. Understood, Captain. I'll start working on tactical options. There might not be many, Park said honestly. Morris returned to his chair. Then we'll make do with what we have. That's what humans do. The USS Resolute turned toward the distant Vulyrie system and began its journey into the fire. The USS Resolute shook as its engines pushed beyond their normal limits. In the engineering section, Chief Kevin Park moved between consoles, watching temperature readings climb toward dangerous levels. The ship was not designed for this kind of sustained speed, but every hour they delayed meant more Vulyrie dead. How long can we keep this up? Asked one of his technicians. Park wiped sweat from his forehead. Long enough. Just keep those coolant systems running and pray nothing breaks. 4 decks above, Captain Daniel Morris sat in his ready room studying everything the ship's computer knew about the Corax Dominion. The information was not encouraging. The Corax were a warrior species that had been conquering others for over 500 years. Their ships were heavily armed. Their soldiers were fierce. They showed no mercy to those who resisted them. The door chimed, and Lieutenant Commander Maria Santos entered. She carried a data tablet and wore an expression that told Morris the news was not good. I've run every tactical simulation I can think of, she said, taking a seat across from him. Against a full Corax fleet, our survival time ranges from 3 minutes to 12 minutes, depending on their formation. Morris leaned back in his chair. And their likely formation? The aggressive one. 3 minutes. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The ship hummed around them, carrying them toward almost certain death. You know, Santos said finally, I always thought I'd retire to a beach somewhere. Maybe open a small restaurant. Morris smiled slightly. You can still do that. I can drop you at the nearest station before we enter the system. And miss the biggest fight of my career? No thank you, sir. She set the tablet on his desk. I've been thinking about unconventional approaches. We can't win a straight battle, but maybe we don't have to. If we can cause enough chaos, enough confusion, we might be able to hurt them badly before they take us down. I'm listening. Santos began outlining her ideas. They talked for hours, planning and adjusting, looking for any advantage they could find. By the time they finished, they had something that was not quite a plan, but was better than nothing. In the medical bay, Dr. Nathan Webb was preparing for mass casualties. He organized supplies, checked equipment, and briefed his small team of medics on what they would likely face. He did not try to hide the truth from them. The Corax use plasma weapons, he explained. The burns will be severe. We need to prioritize speed over comfort. Keep people alive long enough for proper treatment later, if there is a later. His medics nodded grimly and returned to their work. Webb watched them for a moment, proud of their courage and saddened by what he knew was coming. Gunnery Sergeant Patricia Cole gathered her Marines in the ship's small armory. There were only 16 of them, a tiny force meant for boarding actions and security duties. They were not an invasion army, but they were human Marines, and that meant something. Listen up, Cole said, her voice hard as steel. We're heading into a situation where we're outnumbered and outgunned. The Corax are bigger than us, stronger than us, and there are a lot more of them. But they've never fought humans before. They don't know what we're capable of. And by the time they figure it out, it's going to be too late. The Marines checked their weapons and armor, their faces set with determination. They had all volunteered for this. Not one of them had asked to be left behind. On the bridge, Ensign Tyler Grant intercepted another transmission from Vulyrie Prime. He listened to it with growing horror, then reported to the captain. Sir, the situation is getting worse. The Corax have begun landing troops in some areas. They're taking prisoners. He paused, struggling to keep his voice steady. The Vulyrie leader, Elder Counselor Rathani, has sent what she calls a final message. She's thanking the galaxy for the good years and forgiving everyone who didn't come to help. Morris closed his eyes briefly. How long until we arrive? 18 hours, sir. Keep monitoring their communications. Let me know if anything changes. That evening, Morris called the entire crew to the main cargo bay. It was the only space, large enough to hold all 147 people aboard the Resolute. They gathered in rows, officers and enlisted personnel standing side by side, waiting to hear what their captain had to say. Morris stood on a raised platform and looked out at the faces before him. Some were young, like Ensign Grant, experiencing their first real crisis. Others were veterans who had seen combat before. All of them had chosen to follow him into the darkness. I'm not going to lie to you, Morris began. The odds we're facing are bad. The Corax have a fleet of over 30 warships waiting for us. We have one destroyer with an aging hull and systems that are held together by Chief Park's stubbornness. A few nervous laughs rippled through the crowd. Park, standing near the back, shrugged and smiled. Every simulation we've run shows us dying within minutes of engagement. This is, by any reasonable measure, a suicide mission. Morris paused and let his words sink in. If anyone wants to leave, I can arrange transport to a neutral station. No one will think less of you. No one will call you a coward. This fight isn't yours by any law or treaty. He waited. The cargo bay was silent. No one moved. I thought as much, Morris said, and something warm filled his chest. Let me tell you why we're doing this. Out there is a species that has never done us any harm. They're teachers and traders and artists. They have children who are afraid and parents who can't protect them. They called for help, and the entire galaxy told them no. 40 species heard their cries and turned away. He straightened his back and looked at his crew with pride. But we are not going to turn away. Not because we have to. Not because someone ordered us to. We're going because it's right. Because if we don't stand up for the innocent, then what's the point of having all these weapons? What's the point of all our training and sacrifice? Lieutenant Commander Santos stepped forward. The captain is right. The Corax think they can do whatever they want because no one will stop them. It's time someone showed them they're wrong. A murmur of agreement ran through the crowd. Faces that had been uncertain now showed resolve. Hands tightened into fist. Morris nodded. Get some rest. Tomorrow we show the galaxy what one human ship can do. As the crew dispersed, Grant approached the captain. Sir, should I send a message to Earth? To let them know what we're doing? Morris considered this. He thought about his family, his friends, all the people he might never see again. Yes, Ensign. Record my message and send it to Fleet Command. They should know why the Resolute isn't coming home. That night, as the ship raced toward destiny, Captain Daniel Morris recorded his final report. He explained his decision, accepted full responsibility, and asked that his crew be honored for their bravery. Then he sat alone in his quarters and watched the stars stream past his window. Somewhere ahead, a dying world waited for salvation that might come too late. But it was coming. That was what mattered. Help was coming. The USS Resolute dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of the Vulyrie system. For a moment, the bridge was silent as every crew member stared at the tactical display. The situation was even worse than they had feared. 32 Corax warships hung in orbit around Vulyrie Prime. At the center of the formation sat a massive dreadnought, easily 5 times the size of the Resolute. Smaller cruisers and destroyers surrounded it like wolves around their pack leader. Below them, the planet showed the scars of continuous bombardment. Fires burned across entire continents. Cities that had stood for centuries were now nothing but craters. They've detected us, Lieutenant Commander Santos reported. Multiple ships are turning to face our position. Captain Morris straightened in his chair. Open a channel to the Corax fleet. All frequencies. Ensign Grant's fingers moved across his console. Channel open, sir. Morris stood and faced the view screen. Attention, Corax vessels. This is Captain Daniel Morris of the human warship Resolute. You will cease your attack on Vulyrie Prime immediately and withdraw from this system. This is your only warning. For several seconds, there was no response. Then a harsh, guttural voice came through the speakers, accompanied by a video feed. The Corax commander appeared on screen. He was enormous, with dark-scaled skin and eyes that gleamed with cruel amusement. His uniform was decorated with symbols that probably represented all the species he had helped destroy. I am War Commander Thexan of the Corax Dominion, the alien said. You amuse me, human. One tiny ship demands the withdrawal of my entire fleet? He laughed, a sound like rocks grinding together. Your species is unknown to us. You have made a terrible mistake coming here. Perhaps, Morris replied calmly. But I'm giving you one chance to avoid bloodshed. Take it or leave it? Thexan leaned forward, his amusement fading. You have courage, human. I will grant you that. But courage means nothing against superior numbers. Leave now, and I will allow you to live. Stay, and your ship will become dust. Morris looked at his crew. Santos gave him a small nod. Park flashed a thumbs up from his station. Even young Grant, pale with fear, sat ready at his post. We're not going anywhere, Morris said. Thexan bared his teeth in what might have been a smile. Then you have chosen death. All ships destroy the human vessel. The channel closed. On the tactical display, 12 Corax ships broke formation and accelerated toward the Resolute. Here they come, Santos announced. 12 contacts closing fast. They're not taking us seriously, Captain. They're sending less than half their fleet. Good. Let's make them regret that. Lieutenant Huang, evasive pattern Delta. Santos, weapons free. Lieutenant Derek Wong's hands danced across the helm controls. The Resolute surged forward, not retreating but charging directly at the approaching enemy ships. This was not what the Corax expected. Their formation spread out slightly, each ship trying to get a clear shot at the small human vessel. The first Corax weapons fire streaked past the Resolute's hull as Wong rolled the ship hard to starboard. The destroyer moved with a speed and agility that surprised the enemy gunners. Their shots went wide, missing by meters. Santos opened fire. Human weapons technology was different from Corax systems, where the Corax relied on heavy plasma cannons that fired slowly but hit hard. Human ships used rapid-fire railguns that launched solid projectiles at incredible speeds. The Resolute's guns could fire 20 rounds per second, and Santos knew exactly where to aim. The first Corax cruiser exploded as railgun rounds tore through its reactor housing. The second ship lost its engines and began spinning out of control. The third took hits across its weapons arrays, leaving it defenseless. On the bridge of the dreadnought, War Commander Dexon watched with growing disbelief. What is happening? How is one ship doing this? His tactical officer checked his readings twice before responding. The human vessel is moving faster than anything in our database. Their weapons fire rate is beyond our projections. Our targeting systems cannot track them. Then send more ships. Destroy them. 20 more Corax vessels joined the attack. Now the Resolute faced overwhelming firepower, and the tide began to turn. Wong was an excellent pilot, but even he could not dodge everything. A plasma bolt struck the ship's aft section, and alarms screamed throughout the bridge. Hull breach on Deck 7. Park shouted. Damage control teams responding. Another hit. Then another. The Resolute shuddered under the impacts, but it kept fighting. Santos destroyed 2 more enemy ships while Wang weaved through the chaos. The bridge filled with smoke and sparks as systems overloaded down on the planet's surface. The Vulyrie huddled in their shelters and watched the battle through whatever sensors still functioned. Elder Counselor Rathani stood frozen before a display screen, unable to believe what she was seeing. Someone came, she whispered. Someone actually came. The Vulyrie had no way to help. Their ships could not leave the atmosphere because of the Corax suppression field. All they could do was watch and hope and pray to whatever powers might be listening. In orbit, the Resolute was taking heavy damage. 17 crew members were dead. Dozens more wounded. 3 decks were exposed to space, sealed off by emergency bulkheads. The ship was bleeding and burning, but it refused to die. Captain Morris gripped his armrest as another explosion rocked the bridge. They had destroyed 8 enemy ships, but it was not enough. The Corax fleet was still too strong, and the suppression field was still active. Even if they fought until the last human was dead, the Vulyrie would remain trapped. Santos, Morris said, "Where is the suppression field generator?" She checked her readings. "It's on the dreadnought, sir." "The command ship." Morris looked at the tactical display. The dreadnought hung at the center of the Corax formation, protected by dozens of other ships. Getting to it would be nearly impossible. "Long, can you get us close to that dreadnought?" The pilot's eyes widened. "Sir, you want me to fly through their entire fleet?" "I'm asking if you can do it." Wong studied the display for a long moment. Enemy ships swarmed around them like angry insects. The path to the dreadnought was filled with weapons fire and danger. One wrong move would mean instant death. "Yes, sir," Wong said quietly. "I can do it." Morris turned to the ship's intercom. "All hands, this is the captain. We're going to ram the enemy command ship. Sergeant Cole, prepare your Marines for boarding action. This is what we came here for. Let's finish it." The Resolute turned toward the dreadnought and accelerated. Behind it, Corax ships scrambled to follow. Ahead, the massive enemy vessel waited like a mountain of metal and death. But humans had climbed mountains before, and sometimes they had moved them. The USS Resolute screamed through the Corax formation like a bullet through water. Lieutenant Wang pushed the ship's damaged engines beyond every safety limit, weaving between enemy vessels while Santos fired at anything that got too close. The hull groaned under the stress. Warning lights flashed across every station, but they kept moving forward. 30 seconds to impact, Wang announced, his voice tight with concentration. Captain Morris gripped his chair. All hands, brace for collision. The dreadnought loomed before them, a wall of black metal stretching across the view screen. Corax weapons hammered the Resolute, tearing new holes in the already damaged hull. Systems failed one after another. The lights flickered, died, and emergency backups kicked in, bathing the bridge in red. 10 seconds. Santos targeted the dreadnought's docking bay doors and fired every weapon the ship had left. The doors shattered inward, creating an opening just large enough for the Resolute to enter. 5 seconds. Morris closed his eyes. Steady. The Resolute hit the dreadnought's docking bay at an angle, skipping across the deck like a stone across water before grinding to a halt against the far wall. The impact threw everyone forward. Metal screamed. Glass shattered. For a moment, everything was chaos and darkness. Then the emergency lights came on, and Morris opened his eyes. He was still alive. The bridge was destroyed around him, but he was alive. Damage report. He CROAKED. Santos pushed herself up from the deck, blood running from a cut on her forehead. We're not going anywhere, sir. The ship is finished, but we're inside the dreadnought. Morris forced himself to his feet. Then, we still have a mission. Grant, can you broadcast to the Vulyrie? The young ensign was shaking but functional. His console was damaged, but some systems still worked. I can try, sir. Tell them to prepare their evacuation ships. The moment the suppression field goes down, they need to launch. Morris hit the intercom button. Sergeant Cole, you're clear to proceed. Destroy that generator. Deep in the Resolute's lower decks, Gunnery Sergeant Patricia Cole kicked open an airlock door and led her Marines into the enemy ship. They had lost 4 people in the crash. 12 Marines remained, moving in tight formation through corridors designed for creatures much larger than humans. The Corax dreadnought was massive, a city of metal filled with thousands of enemy soldiers. Cole knew they had no chance of fighting through all of them. Their only hope was speed and surprise. Move fast, stay quiet, she whispered. We're looking for the power signatures from the suppression field generator. Should be near the center of the ship. They encountered their first Corax patrol within minutes. 6 warriors, each standing nearly 8 feet tall, with thick scaled armor covering their bodies. The aliens saw the humans and raised their weapons, bellowing war cries. Cole shot the first one through the eye before it could fire. Her Marines moved with deadly efficiency, putting down the rest of the patrol in seconds. The Corax were big and strong, but they were slow compared to humans. Their reactions were sluggish. They expected enemies to fight in predictable patterns. Humans did not fight in predictable patterns. The Marines pushed deeper into the ship, leaving dead Corax behind them. Alarms began to sound throughout the dreadnought. Dexon's voice echoed through the corridors, ordering his soldiers to find and kill the intruders. Cole checked her tactical map. The generator room was 2 levels up and half a kilometer away. Between them and the objective was an army of angry Corax warriors. We're going to have to fight through them, she said. Stay close, watch your corners, and don't stop moving. If we slow down, we die. They climbed through maintenance shafts and ran through empty storage rooms. Twice they walked into ambushes and fought their way out. Private Chun took a plasma bolt to the chest and died instantly. Corporal Williams lost an arm, but kept fighting until blood loss forced him to stop. Back on the Resolute, Captain Morris led a defense of the ship's hull breach. Korax soldiers were trying to board, to finish off the humans who had dared to invade their command ship. Morris picked up a rifle from a fallen crew member and stood beside Santos and Park, firing at anything that moved. "This is not how I expected to spend my afternoon," Park said, ducking behind cover as plasma fire scorched the wall above him. Morris allowed himself a small smile. "Any regrets, Chief?" "Just one. I never got to see that new engine design I was working on." They fought on, holding the line while Cole and her team pushed toward the generator dot in the generator room. War Commander Dexon waited. He had guessed where the humans were heading, and he had prepared a welcome for them. 50 of his best warriors stood ready, along with Dexon himself. The suppression field generator hummed behind them, a towering machine that kept the Vulyrie trapped on their dying world. Cole's Marines reached the final corridor. Only 8 of them remained. They could hear the Korax waiting beyond the door. "No way we're getting through 50 of them," one Marine whispered. Cole pulled out her last 2 grenades. "We don't need to beat them. We just need to reach that machine." She kicked open the door and threw the grenades in one smooth motion. They exploded among the Korax, killing several and throwing the rest into confusion. The Marines charged into the chaos, firing as they ran. It was brutal, desperate fighting. Humans and Korax clashed at close range, where size and strength should have given the aliens every advantage. But the Marines were faster, more accurate, and utterly unwilling to give up. They cut through the enemy formation like a knife through flesh. One by one, Cole's Marines fell. But they kept pushing forward, buying time for their sergeant to reach the generator. Cole found herself face to face with War Commander Dexon. The alien towered over her, his weapon pointed at her chest. "Why?" Dexon demanded. "Why do you fight so hard for a species you have never met? Why do you die for strangers?" Cole's rifle was empty. Her armor was cracked. She had a knife in her boot and nothing else. "You wouldn't understand," she said. "Then explain it to me before I kill you." Cole looked past him at the generator. She looked at the bodies of her Marines scattered across the room. She thought about the millions of Vulyrie waiting below, hoping for a miracle. "Because it's right," she said simply. "Because someone has to stand up for people who can't stand up for themselves. Because being human means you don't leave anyone behind." She drew her knife and charged. Dexon was faster than she expected. His claws raked across her side, tearing through armor and flesh. But Cole didn't stop. She drove her knife into the gap between his neck plates, and while he screamed in pain, she pushed past him toward the generator. Her hands found the control panel. Warning icons flashed. Security locks demanded codes she didn't have. So she pulled the grenades from Dexon's belt and shoved them into the machine's core. "For the Resolute," she whispered. The explosion destroyed the generator. The suppression field around Vulyrie Prime flickered and died in the shelters below. The Vulyrie saw their sensors come back online. The path to orbit was clear. Elder Counselor Rathani's voice rang through every shelter on the planet. "Launch all ships. Launch everything. The humans have given us a chance to live. Do not waste it." Thousands of evacuation vessels lifted off from the burning surface, carrying millions of Vulyrie toward safety. On the bridge of the dying Resolute, Ensign Grant watched the sensors with tears in his eyes. "Sir, the suppression field is down. The Vulyrie are evacuating." Morris let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. "Sergeant Cole?" Grant checked his readings. His face fell. "No response from her team, sir." Morris nodded slowly. He had known this was the cost. He had accepted it when he gave the order. But that didn't make it hurt any less. "Then let's make sure their sacrifice means something," he said. "All hands, prepare to cover the evacuation. The battle was not over yet." The USS Resolute was dying. Fire burned through half its remaining decks. Most of its weapons were destroyed. Its engines were nothing but twisted metal. But somehow, impossibly, the ship still moved. Chief Park had managed to restore just enough power to the maneuvering thrusters to position the broken destroyer between the fleeing Vulyrie Evacuation fleet and the remaining Corax warships. Captain Morris stood on what was left of his bridge, watching the tactical display through smoke and flickering emergency lights. 20 Corax vessels were still operational. The dreadnought was crippled, but not destroyed. And War Commander Thexan, wounded but alive, was rallying his remaining forces for one final assault. "They're coming for us," Lieutenant Commander Santos reported. Her voice was hoarse from smoke inhalation. Her uniform was torn and bloodied. But she stood at her station, refusing to surrender. "Then we hold as long as we can," Morris said. "Every minute we buy is another 1,000 Vulyrie who escape." The Corax fleet advanced, weapons charging. This was the end, and everyone aboard the Resolute knew it. They had accomplished their mission. The suppression field was down. The Vulyrie were evacuating. All that remained was the dying. Ensign Grant stared at his sensor display, blinking in confusion. "Captain, I'm reading new contacts entering the system." Morris felt his heart skip. "More Corax? Reinforcements to finish them off faster? How many?" "How many?" 12 ships, sir. But they're not Corax." Grant's voice rose with hope. "They're Vulyrie, DeLorean, and Keshak vessels." "Sir, they're hailing us." A new face appeared on the view screen. It was a Vulyrie captain, a species known for their reluctance to engage in any conflict. The alien looked at Morris with an expression that might have been shame. "Human vessel, this is Captain Relon of the Vulyrie Unity ship Serene Light. We received the Vulyrie distress call. We did not respond at first. We believed it was not our concern." The Vulyrie paused, struggling with words. "But we heard your response. We watched your ship fight against impossible odds. We saw you sacrifice yourselves for people you had never met." The channel expanded to include the other arriving captains. A DeLorean commander spoke next. Her feathered crest raised in what Morris had learned was a gesture of respect. "We have spent our whole lives avoiding conflict. We told ourselves that neutrality was wisdom. But watching you fight alone changed something in us. We could not sit idle any longer." The Keshak captain, a massive being with 4 arms and plated skin, added his voice. "The Corax have bullied this region for centuries because no one would stand against them. Today, that ends. Today, we stand with humanity." Morris felt tears forming in his eyes, though he blinked them away. "You have no obligation to fight." "Neither did you," Captain Relon replied. "Yet here you are, dying for strangers. If you can show such courage, then the least we can do is follow your example." The 12 Allied ships moved to flank the crippled Resolute. On his damaged bridge, War Commander Thexan watched the new arrivals with growing fury. His fleet was still larger, but his advantage was slipping away. More importantly, his certainty was crumbling. "This is impossible," Thexan growled. "These species have never fought anyone. They hide from conflict like prey animals." His tactical officer studied the readings nervously. "The humans changed the equation, War Commander. They showed the others that standing up to us is possible." Thexan considered his options. His command ship was crippled. A third of his fleet was destroyed or disabled. His soldiers had been humiliated by a handful of human marines. And now he faced a coalition that would only grow larger if he continued the battle. For the first time in his career, Thexan ordered a retreat. The Corax fleet gathered its surviving ships and withdrew from the system, leaving Vulyrie Prime behind. They did not make threats. They did not promise vengeance. They simply left, defeated not just in battle but in spirit. The Vulyrie evacuation continued for hours, with thousands of ships carrying survivors to safety. When the last transport was clear of the planet, Elder Counselor Rathani herself flew to the Resolute in a small shuttle. The human ship was barely recognizable. Great holes had been torn through its hull. Entire sections were exposed to space. Of the 147 people who had crewed the Resolute, 83 were still alive. 17 would never leave the medical bay. The rest were battered, exhausted, but standing. Rathani walked through the corridors in silence, stepping over debris and blood. She had known suffering before, but she had never seen anything like this. She had never seen people destroy themselves so completely for others. Captain Morris met her on what remained of the main deck. He looked like a man who had walked through fire, because he had. His uniform was burned. His face was cut and bruised. But when he saw the Vulyrie elder, he straightened his back and tried to smile. "Elder Counselor," he said, "I hope your people made it out safely." Rathani stared at him for a long moment. Then she did something that no Vulyrie had ever done to an outsider. She dropped to her knees and bowed her head. "Captain Morris," she said, her voice thick with emotion, "my people owe you a debt that can never be repaid. You came when no one else would. You fought when no one else dared. You gave us hope when we had none left." Morris knelt down so he could meet her eyes. "You don't owe us anything. This is what humans do. We look out for each other, even when that means looking out for people we've never met." "Why?" Rathani asked. It was the same question War Commander Dexon had asked, but with a completely different meaning. "Why does your species care so much?" Morris thought about how to answer. He thought about human history, about all the times his people had failed to help each other, about all the wars and cruelty and selfishness. But he also thought about the times they had risen above their worst impulses. The times they had chosen love over fear, sacrifice over survival. "Because we know what it's like to be alone," he finally said. "We know what it's like to call for help and hear nothing but silence. We swore a long time ago that we would never let anyone else feel that way if we could prevent it." Rathani rose and placed her hand over her heart, a Vulyrie gesture of eternal gratitude. "Then your species is more than we ever imagined. The galaxy sees you as newcomers, as primitives from a small world in an empty region of space. But now they will see the truth. Now they will know what humanity really is." 3 months later, the Galactic Assembly convened its largest gathering in a century. Representatives from over 200 species filled the Great Hall, all there to witness a historic moment. Elder Counselor Rathani stood at the central podium, her voice amplified to reach every corner of the chamber. "I come before you today to nominate humanity for full membership in the Galactic Assembly," she announced. "Some of you may wonder why. Humans are new to the galactic stage. Their technology is not the most advanced. Their territory is not the largest. By the metrics we usually value, they are unremarkable." She paused and looked around the hall. "But I have seen what metrics cannot measure. I have seen a single ship fight against an armada to protect strangers. I have seen soldiers give their lives for people they had never met. I have seen courage that inspired cowards to become heroes." The chamber was silent, every being listening intently. Humanity taught us something we had forgotten. They taught us that strength is not measured in ships or weapons or territory. True strength is measured in the willingness to stand up for what is right, even when the cost is everything. True strength is measured in compassion. Rathani raised her hand toward the human delegation. Captain Morris sat among them, still healing from his wounds, wearing a dress uniform that covered the scars he would carry forever. "I nominate humanity not because they are powerful, but because they are good. And the galaxy needs more species who choose goodness over convenience. The vote was unanimous. That evening, Captain Morris stood alone on a balcony overlooking the alien city where the assembly met. The stars stretched out above him, the same stars he had sailed through to reach Vulyrie Prime. So many had died on that journey. Sergeant Cole, Private Chun, 17 crew members who would never go home. But millions of Vulyrie had lived. And the galaxy had learned that humanity was not a species to be ignored. Morris thought about the message he had recorded before the battle, the one explaining why the Resolute had chosen to fight. He had expected it to be his last words. Instead, it had become a beacon, played across countless worlds as evidence that there was still goodness in the universe. Elder, Counselor Rathani joined him on the balcony. "What are you thinking about, Captain?" Morris looked up at the stars. "I'm thinking about the ones we lost. I'm wondering if they would be proud of what we accomplished." Rathani nodded slowly. "They would be. I am certain of it." "How can you be so sure?" The Vulyrie elder smiled gently. "Because they died for the greatest cause there is. They died proving that no one in this universe has to face the darkness alone." Morris smiled back, the first real smile he had managed since the battle. "No," he agreed. "No one does." Somewhere across the galaxy, in the cold depths of space, other species were learning the same lesson. They were hearing the story of one human ship that had changed everything, and they were beginning to understand what humanity meant.